because innovation is not simply just technology. Innovation is just about like how you're willing to do small experiments to improve your life.
Hello, and you're with Aveline Clark on the 6-Star Business Podcast, where we have conversations about what it takes to be 6-star as a 6-star leader in a 6-star business in a 6-star world. And in this episode, I sat down with Mike Liu from the USA. What an amazing man. I was totally blown away with the way his mind works. He just lives and breathes innovation. And whilst we did talk about the product and that he works with and how he's developed this and innovated this in the education space, I really just felt that this was a conversation that went far beyond a product, far beyond an industry or a niche. And it's beautiful to see how there are people in this world using all of their genius to find ways to be better, to show up in the, as their true self, to show up to make a difference, and a difference for good. And that is the essence of Mike Liu. So I invite you to sit back and enjoy this episode with Mike Liu and my co-host Koray Serbest on the 6-Star Business Podcast. Welcome. It is the 6-Star Business Podcast, and I'm here with my co-host Koray. Welcome, and with our guest, Mike Liu. Welcome to you both.
Hello.
Thank you.
Welcome to you, Mike.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on here. Always good to kind of have a table for three to be able to sort of riff and talk about all kinds of fun things from life to business to everything in between.
Absolutely. I like that. Table for three. You get more elbow room, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of half of the 6 stars, right?
That's it. Exactly. So let's kick this off. I would love to ask a few questions of you, Mike, so that we can get to know you a bit better. So could you let us know, who you are, where you are in the world, who you serve, how you serve them, and perhaps something you like to do when you're not busy serving people?
Certainly. So I think in terms of answering these questions, it's always good to start with a story, right? So our company is based in LA, and LA has always been known as kind of like a media capital. But I have kind of always thought about the intersection of technology and media, and always thought that it could really be a way that we can tell better stories or utilize this to solve problems. A lot of people actually do teach people through the medium of story. And so I had been a teaching assistant for about 6.5 years before I went full time with our company, FreeFuse. And basically, what we saw during this period of time was, we noticed students weren't really interacting with some of the video content that they were watching. A lot of educators were moving more and more towards video as a way to distribute their lessons and, really try and, sort of provide a new way for students to learn or consume content. But there's a big problem with that. And the big problem is that these days, nobody wants to watch an hour-long video. And what was kind of happening is these students would get this content, they would barely touch it, and I know because I have all the metrics, I would be able to see what it is that they were watching and what they weren't. And I thought to myself, well, they're rather than just trying to kind of make a stopgap solution, what if we approach this a little bit of a different way? And what I thought about was we're already watching shorter and shorter videos. How do we utilize a system that's going to transform this content into something a lot shorter, but actually still have meaning? They're not just going to be like, 2 hours of 2-minute videos, right? So I always thought that one of the most interesting storytelling technologies, I would say, was the choose your own adventure book. Right, the choose your own adventure book was something that I always found really engaging, and I thought that format was rather fascinating. And then it came back actually as a video piece of content. If you guys are familiar, Black Mirror Bandersnatch was a thing, and I was really enthralled by how many people spent that time talking to each other. What did you do here? What did you choose here? How did you choose this? Like, how many times did you go back to start? And to me, that sounded like number one, it was really engaging. But number two, there was almost like a community built out of it. So our objective was to first start by building a technology that could transform this educational content into these types of experiences. So that's actually what we set out to do. Now, of course, a lot of educators didn't really have the time and the wherewithal. I was in higher ed. A lot of these people are actually utilizing their time to do research. So a lot of it is sometimes on the TAs as well. So in light of that, we actually offered to do it ourselves in order to learn how to create the algorithm to do it. And if anybody's ever edited video content or broken it down, that takes hours sometimes to do. Finding where to make cuts, finding exactly how you're going to slice up the video content and putting some kind of label on it, that took a long time. But that painstaking effort and pain allowed us to actually create the algorithm to develop our system. So while I really suffered for about a 4 month period during that spring semester, the joy that I received was how many students really liked the format. There was 172 kids that used it, and they made 30,000 choices in our nice little decision tree that we made from every piece of content. And so for me, I just thought to myself, well, this is actually providing some value to people. Why don't we go ahead and see if there's a way to bring it to more people? Do they have the same problem? And so a lot of educators that we talked to, they expressed interest in utilizing this new format. It was a way to, condense down their lectures and, kind of give them an opportunity to allow students to choose exactly what they want to learn, find exactly what they were, wanting in terms of information. And everything was just a lot simpler and smaller so that they were more encouraged to access it rather than, oh, it's an hour long video, I'm not going to waste my time with this. So a lot of the students even actually, told us that they appreciated how small the videos were, and it in fact increased their ability to retain information. So all of that was incredibly useful. We actually brought it over to, pretty much like a bunch of different schools since then. So we grew from the one school. We now have it at 15 different schools, and we have 42 courses. But what was interesting is naturally, I've been talking about this with other people, right? And so what's been really interesting in the last like 6 to 8 weeks is that people are kind of coming to us and saying, well, hey, can I try this out for this purpose? Or, we'll reach out to somebody and say, what do you think about this? We'd love to provide a demo. And even in the last 6 weeks, we've actually been able to, generate a lot of leads, and in fact, have generated a good amount of revenue simply from actually, bringing this to people who found a direct need for it, which was breaking down their video content and providing this new opportunity to, teach their employees or do corporate trainings with it. So it's been a really awesome experience to see this thing that I just, created off of, a few concepts in my mind and with our team. And now it's being pulled in all of these different arenas. And I've just been really grateful for the whole journey, the whole process. And, it's really just been an amazing time. And I'm very happy with everything we've been able to do.
Mike, can you just elaborate a little bit better what it is, what you guys doing in the sense of when you're talking about those videos, 1 hour, 2 hours, whatever, it's they have this content filling purpose where people fall asleep. Yeah. And one of those. And so what did you change? Did you make it more interactive and trigger curiosity so people keep on? And so what is the secret? What is this generating all the leads and people are demanding now, hey, can you come up with this? I have this content. Can you have a look? Can you put it in your shape and then just publish it?
Yeah, certainly. And, that's a really great question. Sometimes I've told this story so many times that I kind of like brush over parts that I feel like I've told a few times here. But what they were really appreciating was that, we created this really interactive piece of content. It was an interactive video, and you have choices that actually direct what you see next, right? So it's basically one of those things that, you make a choice, you can actually go to the next segment of content, and we're actually, able to serve you that and, show you where along the path that you were actually going. So everything is presented in this really nice visual tree. And what people really liked about it was our AI actually labeled every segment. So like there is no work to even label anything. So you can find where it is in the tree. You can find all the information that you need, and everything is automatically organized in this structure using our algorithm. So, but yeah, so in terms of how, businesses have been using it, what we've really seen is this really interesting, use case where they want to create something called situational trainings. And there's two different sides of what our tool does. There's the completely automatic side, which means like the AI does everything, and you can just put pieces of information that are now linked topics, segments, and information that goes from maybe an hour, 2 hours, or maybe it's a collection of 10 2-minute videos that are all organized in this tree and labeled. Or there's having maximum control where you really do create something manually, but you create a choose your own adventure version of what you're trying to create in terms of the content. And where that sort of kind of pulled us into was something that we have been trying to wrap our heads around in terms of describing, but we've been calling it situational training. So people actually can go and say, hey, I have this problem that actually happened on site. Now I can go ahead and train myself about what to do next. And that actually provided a lot of value for some of the trainers because they didn't really have something that could really be self directed. And that's really where we've started to see a self directed sort of video learning that people can actually do, something that's very visual that will allow them to go ahead and see what they should do next. And they're very, simple choices. And, it's a really just kind of easy way for them to go ahead and find that exact piece of information in that exact situation and context.
I mean, you see that type of training already coming. So, in the sense of, yeah, in the beginning, you had those dry contents you need to get trained on and learn, yeah, and then you start even the corporate companies, enterprises using animated, yeah, slideshows, whatever it is, and what you're doing is actually even the next step, the next level of. I think the demand. How is that? I mean, you just talked about the leads; they are piling up. So are you guys having competition in that space? Are you competing with the big ones who are the spots and hubs for training and known for their training contents and way of training? And are you coming in as the new kid on the block to disrupt a little bit that space, or how does it look like?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And the way I look at it is I wanted to kind of position this as sort of a media management solution now, because originally we thought about it almost as an ed tech solution, right? But now we're really thinking about it in the greater context of what this does. And while we're focusing initially now on, learning and development, education, and, kind of, sort of those corporate trainings, we found that the other platforms that exist for this, they have a particular format that they do. They allow you to have a registry of, a bunch of different video content. They allow it to be whatever length that you would like it to be for those individual segments. But we really wanted to sort of play on the ability to explore, similar to how you would in a game. It just doesn't have necessarily as much agency. So we wanted to kind of position it almost as its own format. I wouldn't say so much that I want to disrupt those people as much as I would actually want to fit our solution into what they're doing. I don't really want to disrupt so much as I want to kind of create a blue ocean, something that
Right.
actually can fit into what people do. Because I really believe more in actually, sort of adding to what people are doing rather than simply, kind of trying to take customers away from them.
Mm, mm. It's we launched into this conversation quickly into the tech because obviously this is what you're all about, Mike. And I'm really fascinated to know, is this what you've always done? Is this the way your mind and your heart and your soul kind of alchemically combines to come up with these kind of things? Is this you? Are you the innovator of things? Have you always been this way?
I want to say that yes, I've definitely always been this way, but I also think more importantly that it's the understanding that it's not just me, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that one of the things that, I mean, there's people who do a really good job thanking their teams, and I want to do a great job, kind of telling the world that I have a world class group of people that I spend my time with and who I, trust completely to be able to build the things that we need to build. Everybody wants to, I feel like, put the, kind of leader of the organization on a particular pedestal, but it's a privilege to even be able to have the ability to lead other people. The fact that a person is given that role, you should be able to look at that as, I have all of these people's, pretty much I need to have all of their best interests before my own. Because if I am the leader of them, I need to make sure that I have the most personal sacrifice to make sure that, they're taken care of. And that's the way that I've always, led my life. And because of, how our team is constructed, I really want to be able to tell everybody how great they are. Everybody does their own, sort of thing uniquely well. And while I do look at myself as the person who comes up with a lot of the product ideas, and I do appreciate having, the ability to, get all creative like that, that's one of my favorite parts of this is just building, things and thinking about how to create value for people. At the end of the day, I could be an inventor in a garage without the rest of the team. Right. I could be somebody sitting around making designs on my computer on a Saturday night, hoping and dreaming. But the team is what truly brings the entire company to life. And I spend a lot of time really telling people how great everybody else is because I would be nothing without them. But kind of to back it up to actually answer your question, since I was a kid, I've always looked at, things like, for example, Lego sets. You always have, let's say, a bunch of Lego sets that you actually, can go buy and construct. But I was one of those people who could actually take a bunch of different sets and create an entire like little city out of them, out of like a bunch of assorted things. And I never thought that that was going to ever be that useful until like I got into building technology, because now my mind kind of goes into all sorts of, different angles about how to build value for the people that we're serving, whether it's instructors or, whether it's our instructors of course, like, corporate training, or whether it's educators or, of the like. I need to first understand how they work, and then I can build all these really interesting, solutions based on their problems. And that to me is the most fun part, is I get to wield the creativity that, has always sort of been there, but in doing so in a way that serves other people.
Well, that's 6 star right there, folks. I got to say it. If I had one of those noise machines, there'd be a little like boom, in the background. Um, Something you said then, I just want to touch on. You said, you love the creativity and allowing your creativity to go in places and finding out, what's needed from the customer. Are you driven by the need, finding the need first, as in focusing on what your customers need rather than looking at an existing product and saying, how can we improve it?
That's a really great question. So I gave a talk recently. I was previously in, before I joined the Alchemist Accelerator. It's a program in the Bay Area. Before I joined that, I was part of a pre-accelerator program called Founders Boost, and I gave a talk actually, a few weeks ago to the new cohort that they have about how they should look at, serving people or creating products. And one of the things that I said really was, you want to be really obsessed with understanding and serving the people that you're trying to build a product for. And it's probably the only time that I think, like, the word obsession has been used in like a positive way. But like, you really do want to understand somebody really deeply. Like, for example, somebody told me they were working on a product for the first time, and I asked them, so what is your plan to understanding who this person is? And they were like, well, I mean, I'm just going to build it, and then, they're going to, I'm just going to test it out. And I was like, but why don't you talk to these people first? You should just start there. And they said, well, I mean, I want to just kind of get started, like I want to build this, and I want to build this company. And I was like, you don't have a company until you understand somebody enough to like actually solve their need. because you're kind of putting the cart before the horse, right? So in terms of that, like being really focused on building value for another person, or at least like a group of people, and really building that and understanding them to a deep degree is almost like a prerequisite in my mind, to even building anything meaningful. I did 100 customer interviews, customer discovery interviews, I call them in lean startup, but I did 100 of them before I even made anything for the first time, because if I wanted to dedicate myself to like understanding somebody or understanding a problem, I needed to spend that research and really, take the time to, front load that. So I knew, is this really something that could be transformative? So, 50 students, people that I generally called educators, because professors were a little bit harder to find, but I called information sharers, somewhat in the same vein. Some people obviously fit, some people didn't. So that was how we kind of built up that initial set of insights that I said, okay, maybe we'll just try this out and see, is this going to work? And it's funny too. We made something, and you guys will laugh. I actually, my our technical lead and myself, she coded something actually on the Amazon Alexa, and this is before COVID, mind you, right? So this is a hilarious story. We actually were doing a voice choose your own adventure, like a voice activated one is like a test. And I didn't really know that many people locally, because I was living in Texas at the time, that could just go and, do a test with me. So I talked to all my old friends who were in those fields, and I'm doing it over Zoom, right? And, obviously maybe that was a little prescient of me, but I was doing it over Zoom, and I'm having people yell into an interface through the Zoom to activate this choose your own adventure voice, like, device. And it's hilarious thinking back to where we were then, just testing out this idea, and where we are now. But what's even funnier is that whole experiment was moot, because I found out you can't even upload videos to the Amazon Alexa. So that was just basically like 3 weeks of my life I can never have back. But at least it tested the concept. And so, even doing silly stuff like that can at least like figure out, is this something that people actually find value in and will enjoy? Um, so that's kind of like, I guess, the first half of your question. But the second half of it is, the reason why I actually like looking at a product or someone's idea is because I like to be creative, to be helpful in a way where I can say, well, your product is doing this. Did you ever think about it in this light? Did you ever think about it in this kind of like, sort of, did you ever think about it in this field? Did you ever think about it in this type of use case? And those are equally as fun. That's equally as fun to give somebody inspiration to go out to, whole new industry, whole new environment, and then I tell them, you're going to want to go ahead and do like 100 customer interviews and see if that works.
And what's their face when you tell them to go and speak to 100 people?
So when I told someone to go talk to 100 people the other day, it was a phone call, and I could feel the energy over the phone call, that they were like, the dread, right? Like,
Mm.
and people don't like the number 100, in terms of, I feel like, trying to reach some kind of goal. I mean, I told them to break it up, like just do like 10 a week, and then they found it to be more palatable. But like, you tell someone to do 100, and I feel like most people are like, I don't know about that one, like. But most of the time, like, people get to about 40 and they're like, okay, I can actually continue doing this. But it's something I recommend personally.
Mm. Mm. How long have you been innovating for, Mike?
um I want to say that I've been innovating probably since I was a kid. Just like different ways to try out something new, silly stuff that you can make with food, even. Like, I think innovating, takes all kinds of different, brands and flavors, whether you're trying something out new for the first time, maybe combining, dishes together, or whether you're, building something, or, trying out maybe a whole new field of study. I think innovating comes in a lot of different flavors. And I really appreciate, being able to have the ability to, kind of enjoy that risk of trying something new. I think that's kind of why I enjoy startups so much, because, there is a certain amount of risk that you take building something for the very first time. Going out and just believing that you can go and build a company out of a product, and understanding that you're delivering value to people. That's kind of where I feel like innovation happens, because you have to spend a lot of time thinking about all sorts of problems that you never knew even existed, right? Like I never knew, for example, managing people is one thing, but managing people, those are managing people in the context of getting paid, right? Like if they're underneath you, if they don't do what they're supposed to do, they obviously don't have a job or something, or they get reprimanded or whatever. But when it comes to, like, building a startup team, there's you have to figure out like how to actually innovate around, first of all, bringing people in, because it's very hard to like figure out who's actually aligned with your values and your goals. You have to innovate around how do we actually incentivize people, like are they actually people who believe in the mission, and you want to innovate also around even culture. You want to innovate around even like who you are and who you bring in, because innovation is not simply just technology. Innovation is just about like how you're willing to do small experiments to improve your life.
Yeah, I love that. I really love that. It's evolution, it's personal development, but it's business personal development, right? And you're not just focusing on your product and saying, well, we've innovated with this amazing product. You're looking at the whole ecosystem and saying, we've actually
Exactly.
got to innovate everything.
It's
Yeah,
like
exactly.
innovation is a kind of adventure for you, exploring everything you know to build on what you have been experiencing and to explore new areas, green fields for you. Since you, I mean, since you literally jumped from being a graduate into the entrepreneurship, right? Without going the cycle to the corporate world as Evelyn and myself did for many years, and now you are limitless and just you go for what you felt being aspired for, yeah, to just try to live your dream and your vision and build it together with a team, yeah, single-minded, having fun, yeah. So not always the case when you're in corporate, but
Well, I mean, I did take a pit stop in, uh, I took a pit stop to, I don't want to say it was corporate. It was more like, medium-sized company the first time. And then, I worked at a larger scale company while I was living in the Bay Area before I left to like Texas, which was, Texas A&M. And it was funny too, because like I spent a lot of that time. I was like a lab tech, or I forget what it was called, like lab associate. And it's funny that it was almost like there was such a low expectation for what was going to be produced as results, that after a certain period of time, I was like, I'm honestly bored. I need to figure out ways to like improve what's going on around here. So instead, I actually came up with some interesting ways, to actually improve how everything was done. And I really, took it upon myself to figure out how to make the working environment better. So eventually they came in, and, I felt bad because I'd only been working there for 3 months. And the guy who was training me, he was like, yeah, I'm going to get like this promotion. I'm going to be the lab manager. And instead they gave it to me after like the 3 months. And I felt bad, because he was really, really excited about like, getting the pay bump and everything. I also felt bad because I knew I was leaving in 2 months. Long story short, with that, I took that opportunity to really take a pulse check, because I was actually working with a lot of the contractors. And what really bothered me, and what bothers me, even to this day, is like when I feel like people who are contractors aren't treated like part of the company. And I can understand, I guess, why, but I feel like that's such a dehumanizing thing. This person works in this environment. Maybe they don't necessarily work like underneath the roster of people, but it always just kind of bothered me. And so I really always wanted to take a pulse check of like how everyone was doing, and what I could do to make their time there better. And I learned a lot from that about how I needed to be a someone who works in this startup today. There was little to no systems of feedback. Nobody knew if they were doing a good job or a bad job. One guy even intimated to me that he always thought he was going to get fired, which is, how do you work in that kind of environment? That's just, it wasn't even like a toxic environment, but that mindset has to like grow from something. And even if it's not a toxic environment, that mindset is more detrimental to the mental health of the people who are supposed to be all in cohesion working towards one unified goal. And it always struck me as strange. And so for me, I've always just tried to align what we do, always lead by example, make sure I'm taking the pulse check of everybody. And in fact, as we grow larger, as we continue to add more people, I know eventually I will become extracted from that process, and I will need to replicate that, that I need to replicate that type of culture with every person who's going to be dealing with people henceforth, because it would really make me sad to hear one day like we have a toxic work environment, or there's somebody who feels like they're not, their needs aren't being met in some kind of way. And to me, that would be the worst thing, because I want to dedicate my time to delivering an environment where people can be their best selves. That's the most important thing to me.
What kind of things do you do for your team for them to be their best selves?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, one of the things that I really like to dedicate myself to is every person who's come in so far. And I know that this isn't scalable. Obviously, this is kind of like early stage startup stuff. But one thing that I always like to do is just have a chat with, the person if I didn't know them personally. Like, we brought in somebody who I didn't really know that well. And I've really taken the time to spend a lot of time with them, to know kind of how they think, know what's important to them, and really, not just develop empathy, but develop a level of understanding to know what is important to you. Why did you want to be a part of this journey, right? Because when you understand that, it becomes a lot easier for you to like develop, the right structures around them in order to allow them the highest probability of success, right? And so one of the things that I like to do, and this is funny, we actually just did recently, we had people who had never met each other because of the whole remote thing, right? And now we're actually able to all meet each other. So I took it upon myself to actually, we all flew. We had one of our team members flying to LA. Him and my co-founder, they had never met each other throughout this process. We're all working together, hoping to build success as a company. And the greatest thing that I thought to do was actually go on a road trip. We had the Startup Grind conference a couple weeks ago, I think. Yeah. So a couple weeks ago, the Startup Grind conference was on Tuesday and Wednesday. He flew in on Monday. They met each other for the first time, and then we took a 4.5 hour drive up to San Francisco from LA. And I just felt like there was going to be nothing better than to really chat with each other, during that, and be able to exchange stories. Tell each other, what's kind of important, what we enjoy about the company, but even beyond all of, kind of company focused stuff, just, generally humanizing with each other, right? And learning kind of like what we're all about beyond the surface of a screen.
Mike, are you feeling that uh, nowadays the human aspect is a little bit disappearing in the sense that we are operating in an environment which is more dehumanized because we are measuring everything on KPIs, performance levels, and all these things, and which is actually also supported by AI driven technology and stuff like that. Yeah, inventing robots, yeah, doing RPA and all these things. So, what is your view on this?
That's a really good question, because for me, I wanted to. There's two schools of thought with like robotic process automation, automation in general, and AI. One is it's going to replace the jobs of people who are doing that work. And for me to tell you that that's not going to happen is untrue, right? But there's also the other school of thought that says, you can actually have some of those people who were doing things that, were naturally wasting their time. Like, for example, in the case of education, some of the people were making shorter videos, but they were making the TAs do it. And the TAs aren't there to break down videos. The TAs are there to learn and actually teach a class, right? So in those cases, RPA is beneficial. the actual AI portion is actually beneficial. I think that we're going to need to think through certain solutions for people who are getting replaced in the exact work that they're doing. And I think that in order to do that, we need to think about not what does the machine do and how do we give someone a new job, but is there things around how this machine works that we can actually develop, maybe technology engineers, or maybe perhaps there's some kind of support role that we can train people on in preparation for this to happen. And those are just a few thoughts I've kicked around in my head. um, but it's a bigger problem that will begin to happen as more artificial intelligence and robotics technologies start replacing people. And that's the part that is really kind of like the ethical challenge, right? Do we keep building these things and knowing we can drive profit margins and drive greater benefits for the company, and reduce the human element and just kind of just say, well, it is what it is? Or do we think of overall solutions? And in my personal opinion, I think you can innovate in a way where those things can become a whole new industry, right? You can repurpose some of these people and provide them new skills and new ways to be effective in society. I don't think that we need to just throw people away. I think there's new ways that we can do it, but we have to set the foundation for allowing them a transition into a new career or into a new support role. And I think that there's even probably technology, or there's probably even new industries that could come up in order to make that happen. I'm not completely privy to all of those things. I haven't looked it up too much, but it's something that I've always thought of because I don't want people to lose their jobs. That's like something that really kind of like hurts me hearing about. In terms of the KPI thing, however, that is, we are driven by those metrics, but I also think that if you develop KPIs around a really engaging and fun culture, I think that the KPIs can be always done in a way that feels like we're all supporting each other. I think that when KPIs are like, always when KPIs I think are always kind of aligned with singular groups of people gaining a benefit, that's one thing. But there was a smart way that someone did KPIs where they were measured on the total performance of the entire organization. And some of the KPIs I can't remember off the top of my head, but they were crafted a little bit more humanizing than simply just, okay, get like 15 sales and you're going to get an extra like $10,000 at the end of the year, right? That only really helps like the salespeople, right? But if there's a way to kind of look at the overall health and the growth of the organization and develop the objectives and key results around how you can make a more cohesive overall unit, I think that that's a way for people to empathize with each other. And I think by proxy, they will become more humanizing of key performance indicators, because everybody's now tethered to each other, and it's just like making progress in any organization, whether you're going to space or whether you're working at the McDonald's fast food place, right? Like it's actually all working together to make a organization that is going to be cohesive and reach the objectives you're trying to reach.
I mean, one of the KPIs you're referring to is, for instance, employee retention rate. Yeah, where a lot of companies are focusing nowadays to implement this employee experience. Yeah, inside the company, due to frustration, sick leave, which is going through the roof, especially over the last 2 years. Yeah, people working remote, being insecure. Yeah, and companies starting laying off people. Yeah, so I think that's more coming as well, to focus on those KPIs. Otherwise, you lose. Yeah, as a company,
Mm,
if you don't serve the people who are actually the backbone of the company. Yeah, and should be the fundamental pillar of every company. It's not the brand at the end of the day. It's more the people who are holding that brand up. Yeah, and dedicating the
mm.
time, going the extra mile, and sacrificing a lot actually. Yeah, so
Exactly. And that's why I really kind of find it interesting that you have some companies that are against the work from home element. Because it's like if somebody finds their zen, so to speak, in their home, which I happen to find mine, in the comfortability of, my room and stuff. And they don't find their best working environment is, after a maybe 30-minute drive to the office and, having to do all that. I've never really I mean, I understand that there's, some people say like creativity can go down, cross collaboration can go down, but I know of lots of very, interesting founding teams that are creating all kinds of solutions to fix these problems. So I feel like it's a really short-sighted thing to try and go against the whole work from home movement. My mom actually worked from home from when I want to say when I was like 14 even. She was in IT. So like I've been used to kind of like the best practices of this world, which I mean, it wasn't like I ever thought that a pandemic would happen, but I at least was like familiar with how to do it, and it's just always kind of like baffled me about it, that people are like, "No, you need to go back into the office," and I always think about it like this, like, why are you really trying to make that happen, right? Like, I feel like that's maybe not aligned to what someone can be as their best self.
Yeah, it's really insightful. Um, Mike, do you have other organizations that you look up to as examples, or people who have innovated that you look up to them?
That's a really great question as well. I always like to answer this question by kind of flipping it on its head a little bit. I think that sometimes when we have models and heroes and people that we want to aspire to be, I think that sometimes it takes away from the individuality that can become great within yourself. And the way I always look at this is I was kind of looking at the Elizabeth Holmes example, right? Theranos, right? And I feel like in her case, she really was trying to be Steve Jobs part two, right? You wear the black turtlenecks. Yeah, you have a certain sense of, who you are. You're trying to, develop this whole new technology that's going to disrupt, all this entire industry. And, I think it's great to look up to people like Steve Jobs. It's, great to look up to people like Richard Branson. It's great to look up to people, who you think are, not even just like business leaders, but people who you think are really great. Like I could say I look up to Kobe Bryant. I watched him play basketball for, a couple decades, and, rest in peace for him. But one of the excuse me, one of the things that I learned from Kobe was work ethic. He was maniacal about making himself better. He was maniacal about pushing himself to a whole nother level and consistently building upon that foundation. And there is nothing more inspiring to me than to continuously build up everything that I am in a similar type of fashion. And Michael Jordan was the same way, but Kobe obviously lived here in Los Angeles, and if there was anybody who I could say is, a real major hero of mine in terms of how I want to mold how hard I work, it would be Kobe Bryant. Because for him, he is the golden standard. He was a champion. He, spent like days, even night times, weekends, whatever. He spent all that time building himself, and he didn't do it because he wanted fame or glory, or he wanted fame. He did it for the the love of being a champion, right? To be the very best at what you do. And for me, like, I don't look at it so, kind of binary, I guess, because like business takes so much, so many flavors. But I do believe in being the very best that I possibly can be, and really spending tons of time building myself up, and taking the time to consistently work on my game. That's kind of why I took that moniker from like what he does. And so I know a lot of people actually have taken inspiration from Kobe as well, but it's also why I think like I like working the long hours, and it's not kind of one of those things where I work because I feel like I have to. I just love the game. Like I love to innovate. I love to really build things that matter for people. And in the course of that, building up myself and learning how to be a better me is a large, large part of that.
There's a lot of wisdom in your words, man. And question I would have is, how would you define success, and what is success for you today? And what do you envision as a success to reach in the next couple of years, 3, 5, whatever it is?
So, in regards to success, personally, I would love to be able to serve people all over the world. It's a very simple, simple goal, right? I would love our technology to be used by people all over the world, and not simply because, hey, it's going to get $1 billion, but like the ability to have it really be something that can be utilized by people all over the world means I gave value to people in places that I could never even have thought it would be able to, I would be able to reach, you know, probably when I was a kid, and even maybe a few years ago. So to me, yes, I can say the monetary numbers and say yes, I want to reach this revenue and reach this, but at the end of the day, I don't really do it for money. Like, I don't care about the money. Like, I care about more like the actual, kind of creating something that truly matters to other people, because that's the real excitement to it. The real ability, because at the end of the day, there's actually Simon Sinek created a book called The Infinite Game. So if you guys are familiar, we'll start with why. He created a few other elements or books that I've read as well. Leaders Eat Last, which I've taken, a lot of inspiration from, and The Infinite Game. Um, and The Infinite Game is really that the goal of continuing to play is that you still have the ability to continue playing, so to speak, right? You're not there to get to this mountaintop and it's not like a movie. You get to the end, you made it to like, this high place, and the curtains fall and the story's over. No, you keep going. You get to, like, let's say you get to $1 million in revenue. Do you want to stop? I mean, so it's okay if somebody has like a business that's a good business, right? But for me, like, I feel like I want to keep climbing the mountaintops and figuring out how to deliver value to more and more people, because that means I get to continue playing, right? And I get to continue innovating, and I get to continue building more and more really awesome things. And the only way that they're awesome is if other people use them and find value. So to me, that's the game. The game is to like continue playing. And that whole concept was really, really interesting because, like, there's sort of a perception, right, when you read a news article and it says like, oh, said person raised like X amount of money, or say said person, made a $1 billion acquisition. And those are cool, but they're like kind of the Twitter headlines of like what the journey is. Whereas the journey is every part of that, right? And every piece of that. And so, that to me, the success to me means I got to keep growing and playing. That's the success.
So literally, the journey itself is the goal. Yeah. So if you're running
Yep.
out of mountains, you go into the universe, whatever it is. Yeah.
Well, I think some of those guys stopped climbing mountains and decided to go shoot themselves into space, right?
Yeah.
That was their next mountain, right? um and you know for me, it's not necessarily that you keep kind of running out of mountains to do. There's all kinds of things you can solve, right? Like, you can solve a disease, right? Like, you can pretty much go put tons of funding in, and you can go put it into philanthropic works that are going to help people. That could be your next mountain. I want to solve this problem, and it's not necessarily business related. It might be something that's actually a whole nonprofit effort. I want to actually bring, like, let's say I want to actually go ahead and save parts of the rainforest, or I want to go ahead and plant trees in a whole nother country, and, maybe start creating, a biodome in the middle of Africa, right? Like, winning or being able to, continue succeeding in one game, right, also opens up the ability to solve more problems and have more fun doing that. Because, just because I find a lot of fun creating products for people doesn't mean that I don't want to solve even bigger problems. And to me, like, the ability to be able to build something at such a large scale also gives me probably the ability to kind of create meaningful solutions in other new ways, in other places with other problems. And those things are equally exciting. That's to me also part of the journey. That is a large part of why I do
So it just doesn't stop. You're limitless, Mike.
it. No, I just feel like if I stopped, I would, I don't know, be bored.
Um, I'm conscious of the time, and I tell you what, I wish we could just keep going and going. Um, I've got a couple little questions for you. The first one is, what does 6 star mean to you?
So, in terms of 6 star, I would think about it in the sense of the holistic part of everything, from who you are as a person to who you are and how you influence the world around you. And I feel like when you think about how you make an impact on the world, I think those are pretty much all the elements that I think go into that. It's kind of like the sense of, and I always butcher this saying, so if I say it wrong, I apologize. But like, it's always like, act locally, think globally, or maybe it's the inverse. I always forget. But I think it's really important to see how your daily actions are leading to who you are as a person, right? Habits are so important, right? And habits aren't simply just, okay, I brush my teeth at like 10 p.m. every day or something. They're more like, who am I repeatedly, and what am I repeatedly doing that leads to who I'm going to be tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And so I've really taken the time to sort of curate what I do every day and build a structure, because I want to be able to, number one, lead by example. I want to, develop these environments for people to succeed at the best rate they possibly can. Whenever anybody asks for help, I'm more than happy to like sit down, spend some time with you. Someone I hadn't even talked to, for months, called me on the phone the other day and asked, "Can you talk to me about the startup idea?" And I spent that time to do it, right? Because that's what I want to do. And it's not because I want to be known as something. It's just fundamentally who I am. I like to give and provide value as best as I possibly can. And people have been so gracious with their time, their energy, the belief that our product can really be meaningful to them. And I've just been incredibly grateful to even be allowed to do what I do. And in order for me to continue getting better at that, it's all about, what can I give back to the community? What are my typical habits, and how do I, consistently build who I am every day? And last but not least, how am I going to leave an impact on the greater lasting world? And it's just like a really simple 3 thing framework. So hopefully that answered your question there.
Oh, absolutely, it did. Koray, have you got
Sim-
something else you want to add?
Simple words, but very impressive. So actually, that's what we do as well, Evelyn and I. So always looking for how to give,
Mm.
how to support, to help. Yeah, to just give back what we experienced in the past. Yeah, how people helped us in our tough times, good times. Yeah, and if more people
Mm.
would do that, more focus on treat others the way how they want to be treated, a very simple approach, yeah, an universal, yeah, way of interacting with each other, I think we would have a much more prosperous future for all of us. Yeah, but I think with people like you, we get there. I'm pretty sure.
Well, I appreciate that. I don't know if you guys have read them, but I'm sure you have. But there's a couple books that really, they didn't change my life like, oh, I read this and I completely changed who I am. They were validators. The first one being, um, Adam Grant wrote Give and Take. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but Give and Take is a fantastic book, and he did a bunch of studies about the nature of givers. And he had three very binary kind of ways to look at people. It was like givers, matchers, and takers. And he was talking about how givers were actually some of the people who succeeded the most. And I never gave in the sense of like, ever expecting anything in return, but it was really nice, and a nice validation to see that people who give a lot end up actually doing really well for themselves, and more so than the so-called other categories. And it's not really about like a contest or anything, but it just like everybody always had that kind of notion, like, you don't want to be like a sucker, right? Like you don't want to be somebody who like, continues to just like, give and everybody kind of like takes from you, right? So it was good to kind of see that. And it was a really cool way to, sort of validate the way I'd been living my life. The other one that I think a lot of people read is The Go Giver. The Go Giver is a giant allegory of a bunch of, or not a bunch, but it was one story about a guy who learns about the fortunes of someone that he works with. He introduces him to somebody else, and the entire you know element of the story is about how they were giving people, and it really built a fortune for them because they were willing to help others, help them get opportunities, and then when they remember, they would bring opportunities back to them. And so it was like a really really good allegory for that way of life, and it was cool. I read that. It was like 120 pages. I had a 5-hour flight from like Houston to LA, and I like read the entire thing in one sitting because I was like, okay, this is interesting. Let me like continue going on. I like couldn't put it down. And I recommend that anybody who really wants to maybe incorporate things into their life like that, take an opportunity to read some of the anecdotal stuff and read The Go Giver because it's more of like a story. Because it can really give you some ideas about maybe how you can provide value to other people, and then habitually, if you just try and help one person every day, like a little bit, 5-minute favors is one of my favorite things that Adam Grant preaches. But with a 5-minute favor, if anybody asks me something that takes me 5 minutes, I'll try and do my best to do it. And if you can help one person every day, then you habitually become somebody who now does that every single day.
That's gold. That's really awesome. And I love the Go Give Up. I have heard of Give and Take, but I haven't read it. So that's now something I'll look into. Thank you. I just looked at the clock. We've gone over time. Mike, I want to ask you, is there any kind of maybe a tidbit or a little piece of advice on top of what you've already given our listeners that you can leave them with? I'd love to hear what that would be.
I would say this. I was told many, many times in my life that my idea was stupid. And that, when you kind of take in that feedback and understand where it comes from, you can maybe gain new insights rather than simply just shooting it down as someone else doesn't understand you, or that your idea sucks and you should never work on it. I think that being able to have a conviction about what you're working on, the people that you're trying to serve, and what you're, who you are and what you plan to do can be a great step in the right direction towards, finding that level of fulfillment and purpose when you do build a company or you do build a product, right? And I'm not saying like close your ears and hope, don't listen to anybody, but I am saying that there takes a certain level of perseverance and a certain level of persistence that you can get turned down, in terms of what you're trying to bring to the table so many times. You can have people tell you that you're silly for even thinking about trying to even start a company on something. I've had tons of people tell me, I can't even understand where I would ever use this. And now that we're using the right language to describe it, people are thinking about it differently. So my advice has always been, if you've done the homework, the people that you're serving better than anybody else. No matter what someone looks at it and says, blah 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 blah, this doesn't look very good. Like I don't think you guys are the right people. Blah blah blah. If you have a certain level of persistence, and if you take the time to like continue working on those ideas, don't get discouraged. Keep pushing forward, and you'd be surprised like the heights that it can take you. And I know that from personal experience, like from my own personal experience. So the only thing that I would tell people is just persist and move on.
Persist and move on. That's brilliant. Thank you, Mike. Thank you for your insights, your story, your wisdom, and your journey. What you've shared with us today. I am really grateful. I just blown away. Loved it. Loved every second of it. Koray, What about yourself?
Thanks for sharing. Good insights. Hopefully, it's going to inspire a lot of other people while watching this
Mm,
podcast going forward. And just keep what you're doing. I mean, yeah, it's the right
yeah,
way. It's the only
it
way,
is.
honestly. Yeah.
Mm, I appreciate that, and I'm just grateful that I've been able to chat with you both. And even though it's 10 p.m. out here in LA, I've always just been grateful to have great conversations. And so, thank you for having me on this show, and just really appreciate the time we've been able to spend together.
Thank
More
you
than
so
welcome.
much. Yeah.